Elias Turner had lived under the wide sky for a long time. 15 years is a long time for any man to be alone, but Elias did not complain. He had built a small cabin of cedar logs near a fresh spring at the base of Red Canyon walls. The land around him was quiet, filled with sagebrush, tall grasses, and the slow songs of wind moving through rock. A man could hear his own heartbeat if he listened. Every morning, Elias rose before the sun. He stirred the coals in his fire, cooked beans or cornmeal, fed his 2 horses, then walked the fields he planted. The seasons shaped his life. When the summer sun burned hot, he worked early and late, resting at midday in the shade of cottonwood trees. When winter came, he chopped wood and salted meat, preparing for cold nights. It was a simple life, but it was steady. He kept his words few and his mind steady. Long ago, he had been a different man. He once worked with trail riders who drove cattle across many states. He laughed with them around campfires, shared plans, and chased dreams. He had a family then too, but loss came in a heavy winter, and when grief came, he did not know how to carry it. So he rode away, looking for quiet ground where memories would not call to him so loudly. People in nearby towns spoke of him as a man who preferred silence. Some said he had forgotten how to smile. But those who had spoken to him knew he was not cold. He simply lived gently, as though the world was breakable. One warm afternoon, Elias traveled up the canyon to gather wood. He led his mule along a narrow trail where the sunlight glowed bright against red rock and tall pines. He expected to hear only birds and wind, but instead he heard a sharp cry. It was the sound of someone in pain. He looked toward the sound and saw 3 young Apache women near a slope of loose stones. A small pony had fallen and was struggling. One of the women held the pony's head, speaking softly. Another stood ready with a rope, and the third was pressing her hand to her ankle, which was swollen. Elias did not rush or shout. He slowed his step so they could see him clearly. He lifted his hat as a sign of respect and spoke calmly. "I can help if you wish." The sisters exchanged a look. They could see he was alone, carrying tools and not weapons. The eldest, with steady dark eyes, nodded. Elias moved carefully, as if approaching a frightened horse. He studied the slope, the rope, the pony. He guided the sisters where to pull, and together they got the animal up slowly. Then he knelt by the injured sister's ankle. He did not touch her without asking, "May I look?" She nodded. Her name, he learned later, was Nita. Elias checked the swelling, the color, the shape. It was a sprain, not a break. He helped her make a firm wrap from cloth she carried. He did all this quietly, explaining what he did so they felt safe. The eldest sister introduced herself as Chenoa. The one with the rope was Atsa. They thanked him in their language and in his. Elias nodded, lifted his hat again, and went back to his mule. He did not expect to see them again, but he did. 2 days later, as Elias sat outside his cabin repairing a saddle strap, the 3 returned, leading their pony, who now walked without strain. They carried a basket of berries and dried corn as thanks. Chenoa said, "Your hands know how to help. We wanted to return kindness." Elias offered them seats near the shade. They talked slowly, respectfully. They spoke of hunting trails, weather patterns, and safe water springs in summer. The sisters laughed often, their voices light as running water. Elias found he enjoyed listening. Over the next weeks, the sisters came often. Sometimes they traded woven blankets for tools Elias made. Sometimes they helped him carry water or shared news of approaching storms. Other days they simply sat beneath the cottonwoods and talked. Elias learned the Apache names for plants he had seen for years but never known how to use. In return, he showed them how to mend broken reins and how to read cattle tracks. They shared knowledge as easily as sharing bread. It was not fast. It was not loud. Trust grew like new roots in dry earth, quiet and patient. When Elias worked, the sisters noticed things about him. He was strong, but he never used his strength to control. He spoke few words, but when he spoke, he meant them. He listened more than he talked. He did not talk down to them or act as if he knew more. He respected their knowledge and understood that he was learning from them too. Nita liked his patience. Atsa liked his sense of fairness. Chenoa liked his calm spirit. They spoke of him often when they returned to their village. Their grandmother simply smiled as though she had seen something like this before. One evening, clouds rolled in, silver and heavy. The sky glowed with that strange color that comes before rain. The sisters visited again, bringing woven baskets. They sat with Elias near his small fire outside. The air was cool, the scent of pine rising with the coming storm. Chenoa watched the firelight flicker on Elias's face. She could see both strength and loneliness there. A loneliness that had stayed for too many years. She had known men who were loud, proud, eager to show how strong they were. Elias was different. He did not try to be more than he was. He simply was, steady as stone and gentle as water. After the fire burned low, Chenoa spoke. You have lived alone for many seasons. Not because you are selfish, because life was hard for you once. Elias did not look away. He breathed slowly. Yes, you built this home with your own hands. You worked this land alone, but life is not meant to be carried alone. Not always. Atsa leaned forward, resting her hands on her knees. We have watched how you live. You work with respect. You listen. You do not treat us as less. You do not treat any life as small. Nita smiled softly. We feel safe here. Elias felt something shift in his chest. A warmth he had not felt in many years. He did not speak because he did not want to push away the moment with the wrong words. Chenoa looked at him directly, her voice calm and steady. We would like to join our lives with yours. The three of us together. Not as servants, not as possessions, not as something taken. As partners. As a family that builds together. Shares together. Lives together. If you accept, we will speak to our elders and join our home with yours. The world seemed to still. The fire crackled quietly. The wind slowed. Even the horses stood quietly. Elias did not answer right away. He was not a man who rushed. His heart moved carefully like a wild animal testing new ground. He looked at the three sisters, each strong in her own way, each patient enough to ask without demanding. For a long moment, he simply breathed. Then he stood and walked to the edge of the field. The sky was wide and open, painted with soft evening clouds. He remembered cold winters alone, long nights where the silence echoed, the ache of missing voices, the weight of being the only heartbeat in a cabin. He realized something simple and clear. He was tired of being alone. He did not fear the idea of family. He feared not deserving one. When he returned to the fire, he spoke quietly, but his voice did not tremble. I need time to think, not because I doubt your kindness, but because I want to answer with my whole heart. If I say yes, it must be yes forever. Chenoa nodded. We understand. We will wait. They rose, lifted their baskets, and started along the path home. Before they disappeared into the dusk, Nita turned back and smiled. You do not have to carry life alone anymore. Remember that. Elias watched them go, the sound of their footsteps fading into the canyon. For the first time in 15 years, the silence around him did not feel heavy. It felt full of possibility. Elias Turner spent the next few days walking the edges of the canyon and thinking. He walked along the dry creek beds and the tall grasses swaying in the wind. He thought about the years he had lived alone, the silence that had been his only companion, and the long winters when the wind howled and the stars seemed too far to reach. He thought about the three sisters, Chenoa, Atsa, and Nita, and how their visit had changed everything. They were not asking for comfort or for him to leave his life behind. They were asking to share it with him. To build something together, not take from him, but grow with him. He thought about what it meant to trust again, to care again, and to allow life to be more than survival. Elias realized that he had spent so many years fearing loss, fearing disappointment, that he had stopped seeing the possibility of hope. He understood now that fear alone could not protect him. Only life itself, shared with others, could do that. The next morning, Elias walked to the trail leading to the sisters' village. He had not been there before, though he had watched the smoke from distant campfires for years. He rode his horse slowly, carefully, thinking of the words he would speak. He did not want to rush, but he knew that action was part of trust. When he arrived at the village, elders were sitting outside their homes, weaving baskets and tending small gardens.
Children played near the edges of the dirt paths, their laughter bright against the quiet mountains.
The sisters were there, waiting. Their eyes lit up when they saw him, but they did not speak. They knew he was a guest in their home and a stranger in their world, but also someone they hoped to bring into their circle of life. Elias dismounted and bowed slightly. I have come, he said, not only to speak for myself, but to honor your family and your people. I wish to join my life with these three sisters if the elders will allow it. I do not seek to command or own. I seek to build, to work, and to live with respect and care. The eldest elder, a woman with silver hair and eyes that had seen decades of sun and rain, studied him quietly. She leaned on her cane and spoke slowly. It is not enough to wish. Actions matter. You must show your heart and your hands. Life with us is not easy. You must prove you can share and protect not just alone but with many together. Elias nodded. I understand. I will do what is needed. I am ready to learn and to work. For the next few weeks, Elias stayed in the village during the day. He helped repair roofs, mend fences, and carry water. He learned to cook over open fires with care, using local ingredients he had never known. He listened to stories from elders about the stars, the land, and the old ways of living with nature. He worked alongside the sisters, who taught him how to plant corn and squash in ways that would resist drought. They showed him hidden springs where the water stayed cool all year. It was not always easy. Sometimes his hands were sore and sometimes he grew frustrated with mistakes. But the sisters laughed with him, not at him, and guided him patiently. Even when he fell behind in work, they did not scold him. Instead, they reminded him that life was not a race but a rhythm. And Elias, who had once thought only of survival, began to feel the joy of living. One evening, after the sun dipped behind the canyon walls and painted the sky in pink and gold, the four of them sat near a fire outside Elias's cabin. The sisters spoke softly of the land, of animals they had seen, of stars that guided travelers. Elias listened and shared stories of the trail drives he had taken, the rivers he had crossed, and the storms he had survived. They shared food, laughter, and silence, each comfortable in the company of the others. It was during that quiet evening that Elias realized the full meaning of what they had offered him. They were not asking him to give up his independence. They were offering companionship, partnership, and family. He had learned to live with solitude, but he had never known how strong life could be when shared. Weeks passed into months. Together, they repaired the cabin, built a larger barn for horses, and planted more fields. When rain fell, they celebrated its arrival, for it brought life to their crops. When wind blew strong, they helped one another secure the cabins and barns. The work was hard, but it was meaningful. The laughter that filled the air was a reward that no treasure could match. The neighbors began to notice. Travelers who passed through the canyon would stop and admire the home built by four determined people. They spoke of the cowboy who had once been alone, and of the three sisters whose courage and wisdom had changed him. Children learned from the sisters and the cowboy both, gathering lessons about survival, respect, and kindness. When the winter came, it was harsher than any they had expected. Snow fell in heavy sheets covering the canyon in white. The wind howled, rattling the cabin walls and bending the trees. Yet inside, the fire burned bright and the home was warm. Elias, the sisters, and the children they now cared for together shared blankets, food, and stories. They laughed when the wind shook the roof and sang songs to chase away the fear of darkness. One morning, after a night of heavy snow, Elias walked outside. The air was crisp, the canyon sparkling with frost. He looked at the cabin, the barn, and the small garden buried beneath snow. And he felt a sense of pride, not for what he had built alone, but for what they had built together. Chenoa came up beside him. "It is beautiful," she said softly. "Not because of the snow or the trees, but because we built it together. That is what matters." Atza and Nita joined them, and Elias smiled. For the first time in 15 years, he felt that life was not something to endure, but something to cherish. They stood together, looking at the canyon, at the land that had once been a place of solitude, now full of life. As spring returned, the garden grew green again, and the animals thrived. Travelers would stop and leave gifts of dried meat or fresh bread, impressed by the harmony of the home. The sisters taught the children of the village what they had learned from Elias and the land. They shared knowledge freely, and in doing so, they strengthened the community around them. Through each day, Elias discovered that strength was not just in muscles or in endurance. It was in kindness, patience, and respect. It was in listening and learning. It was in standing together when storms came, and in celebrating quietly when life was simple and good. By summer, their home had become more than a cabin in the canyon. It was a place of trust, of learning, and of laughter. It was a place where work and joy existed side by side. It was a place where the cowboy who had once stood alone could see the value of life shared. And one evening, under a sky full of stars, Elias turned to the sisters. "I understand now," he said. "I am ready to share my life with you, not as someone who takes, but as someone who builds with you. We will face the storms together. We will celebrate the sun together, and we will grow side by side every day. Chenoa, Atsa, and Nita smiled. They did not speak because words were unnecessary. They had built trust over time, and now it was complete. The future was open, wide like the canyon before them, waiting to be filled with life and laughter. And so, the cowboy who had once lived in silence and the three sisters who had shown him the strength of unity created a home full of life. Not a home built of walls alone, but a home built of hearts. They faced challenges, weathered storms, and celebrated small victories together. The children they taught and the neighbors they welcomed added warmth and color to the story of their lives. Life, Elias realized, was not meant to be carried alone. It was meant to be shared, nurtured, and celebrated. And in the quiet canyon where he had once walked alone, the sound of laughter, footsteps, and shared work told a new story. A story of courage, patience, kindness, and the power of living together. The world outside might have been harsh, but inside their cabin and fields, life was rich. Not because it was easy, but because they faced it together. And Elias Turner, the cowboy who had once stood alone for 15 long years, now woke each morning surrounded by warmth, respect, and belonging, the greatest gift any man could receive. They built not just a home, but a life full of hope. And for all who passed through the canyon, the story of the cowboy and the three sisters became a tale of courage, unity, and the human spirit. It was a story of strength that came not from fighting alone, but from living together side by side, heart to heart, through every season and every challenge. And in that quiet canyon, under the endless sky, Elias knew one simple truth: life is strongest when it is shared.